Do you know what surprises me the most today? It is not China's growth, not America's dominance, but India's sudden rise that nobody in Washington, nobody in Silicon Valley, and nobody on Wall Street truly expected. For decades, America believed the next great technological competition would come from China. They built strategies, alliances, and policies around containing Beijing. But in focusing so much on one direction, they missed the quiet storm building in the other, and that storm is India. America never imagined that India, once seen as a country struggling with infrastructure, bureaucracy, and poverty, would suddenly become the epicenter of a technological revolution. They underestimated how fast India could change, how fast it could innovate, and how fast it could mobilize its young population into the digital economy. And now America is shocked because the rules of the game have changed and the player they never prepared for is rewriting the script. Think about it. For decades, the global narrative was simple. America was the leader of technology. China was the challenger and India was the back office, the place where coding was outsourced, where call centers answered phones, where talent left to work in Silicon Valley. That was the story, but today that story has collapsed. India is no longer just the back office of the world. It has become the brain, the architect, the innovator, the place where solutions are created, not just executed. Why was America not prepared? Because they assumed India's rise would be slow, predictable, and incremental. They thought the country's democracy, diversity, and complexity would hold it back. They thought bureaucracy would suffocate progress. They thought poverty would drain energy. They thought India would always remain dependent. What they never considered was how those very challenges would fuel innovation. They never considered when you have 4 billion people and half of them under the age of 30, you don't move slowly, you leap. America looked at India through old lenses. They saw a nation of contradictions, not a nation of possibilities. But India quietly built something that even the United States did not anticipate: digital infrastructure at a scale never seen before. While America debated about privacy, data monopolies, and regulation, India built Aadhaar, a digital ID system that connected more than 1 billion people. While America's payment systems remained fragmented and costly, India created UPI, a platform that today processes more transactions than Visa and MasterCard combined. While the U.S. fought over access to health care, India was rolling out digital health records for millions. While Silicon Valley was consumed by unicorn valuations, India was creating solutions that reached villages, farmers, and street vendors. And that is where America failed to see the truth. They were measuring India by the old standards of GDP, per capita, and infrastructure gaps. They didn't measure its digital strength, its capacity to scale, or its ability to leapfrog. They didn't see how the smartphone in the hands of a farmer could become more powerful than a branch of a traditional bank. They didn't see how low-cost internet could connect hundreds of millions overnight. They didn't see how startups from Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Delhi were solving global problems with frugality and speed. Today, when you look at India's rise in technology, you realize why America is shocked, because the foundations of the digital economy that India built are not just local experiments, they are global models. Every country in the world is now studying UPI. Every investor is now looking at Indian startups. Every multinational is realizing they cannot ignore this market anymore, and America is scrambling to understand how it missed it. The irony is this: America has always been home to Indian talent. The CEO of Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and IBM, all Indian origin leaders. America knew Indians were capable, but they believed the talent had to leave India to succeed. They never believed India itself could become the center of gravity. That is why the shock is so profound, because now the talent does not need to leave the opportunities, the capital, the infrastructure. They are already inside India, and that changes everything. So the question is not whether India's rise is real. The question is why America, with all its intelligence agencies, think tanks, universities, and corporations, failed to see it coming. The truth is simple. They were blinded by their own assumptions. They were too focused on China. They were too comfortable with their own leadership. They underestimated the hunger of a nation that has been waiting for its moment for decades. And when a nation with 600 million young people decides to move, the world cannot remain the same. This is why today America feels unprepared. They did not prepare for India's sudden rise in technology, because they never believed it could happen this fast. They thought they had more time. They thought the competition would be predictable. But technology does not move in straight lines. It moves in leaps. And India has just taken a leap that changes the balance of power in the 21st century. And let me tell you, this is only the beginning. If you really want to understand why America was caught off guard, you have to look deeper into the breakthroughs India has been quietly engineering. These are not just minor improvements. They are fundamental shifts in how a country of 4 billion people interacts with technology. And once you scale something to that size, it doesn't stay local. It becomes a global force. Take the example of UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. In the United States, even today, people swipe cards, wait for confirmations, pay extra fees, and deal with fragmented systems owned by private corporations. In India, a rickshaw driver, a street vendor, or even a beggar can accept digital payment instantly with zero transaction cost. That's not just efficiency, that's empowerment. India created a financial system where inclusion is not an afterthought. It is the design itself. While the US was arguing about how to regulate fintech, India was building a platform that processed billions of transactions every month. And that system is now being exported, studied, and adopted by other nations. America didn't expect this because it believed scale would always be an obstacle for India. But India turns scale into strength. Once you solve a problem for 1 billion people, the cost per user becomes negligible and the impact becomes exponential. That's why investors today are not just funding Indian startups for their local market. They're funding them because those solutions can be deployed in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. America assumed innovation would always flow from the West to the rest, but India has reversed that. Today, solutions are flowing from East to West, and it's not just fintech. Look at space technology. America spent billions building rockets, and for decades, only NASA and a few elite organizations could access space. India with ISRO launched missions to Mars and the Moon at a fraction of the cost. When America looked at those numbers, they were shocked. How could India send a satellite to orbit for less than the cost of a Hollywood movie? How could India achieve precision with so few resources? This is what I call frugal innovation. It's not about spending more money. It's about finding smarter ways to use less. And in today's world, that efficiency is a competitive advantage America was not prepared for. Artificial intelligence is another area where America thought it had a permanent lead. Silicon Valley believed they had the talent, the data, and the infrastructure locked in. But look at what's happening in India with a massive population generating unprecedented amounts of data. With startups applying AI not just for chatbots and advertising, but for agriculture, education, and health care. India is building an AI ecosystem that is practical, wide-reaching, and deeply integrated into daily life. America built AI for consumer convenience. India is building AI for survival, for farmers predicting crop yields, for doctors diagnosing diseases in villages with no specialists, for teachers scaling lessons to millions of children. And when you build technology for survival, it becomes more resilient, more adaptable, more universal. Let's talk about startups. A decade ago, nobody believed India would produce global tech companies. People thought Indian entrepreneurs were good employees, not founders. But today, India has one of the largest pools of unicorns in the world. Companies like Bajaj in education, Flipkart in e-commerce, Zarata in stock trading, and Ola in mobility are not just copying Western models. They are reimagining them for scale, for affordability, for resilience. And when global investors look at these companies, they realize something. If it works in India, it can work anywhere, because India is the toughest test market in the world. If a product can survive India's complexity, it can survive anywhere. This is where America's surprise turns into fear. They thought innovation would always be their monopoly. They thought intellectual property and R&D budgets would keep them ahead. But innovation is not just about patents. It's about solving real problems in real time, and India is doing that every single day. America has billion-dollar startups solving for convenience. India has startups solving for existence. And when existence meets scale, you get global disruption. Now consider the talent shift. For years, the brightest Indian engineers went to America. They fueled Silicon Valley, but today many of them are staying in India or coming back. Why? Because the ecosystem has matured. Because the opportunities are bigger at home. Because capital is flowing into Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. And once you stop the brain drain, you unleash a brainstorm. That's what's happening now. America can no longer rely on India's talent pipeline because the pipeline has reversed direction. Add to this the fact that India's government has become one of the most aggressive promoters of digital transformation, from Digital India initiatives to startup-friendly policies, from defense tech collaborations to semiconductor investments. The state is not just supporting innovation, it is demanding it. And that combination of private creativity with public ambition is powerful. America didn't expect India's government to move so fast because for decades bureaucracy was a barrier. But today it has become an engine, and here's another angle. America missed India's diaspora. While the U.S. has enjoyed the contributions of Indian origin leaders, those same networks are now channeling capital mentorship and global partnerships back into India. So you have this loop: Indian talent succeeds abroad, builds influence, and then reinvests in the homeland. That feedback loop accelerates India's growth even further. America, with all its foresight, simply did not prepare for this speed. They assumed India's rise would be linear, but it has been exponential. They assumed it would take generations, but it took 1 decade. They assumed India would follow their model, but India wrote its own. And that is the shock. A country they thought of as a follower has become a leader in areas they never guarded against. This is why you're now seeing headlines in Washington about the Indian challenge. It is why American think tanks are suddenly writing reports about India's digital leap. This is why venture capital firms are shifting billions into Indian startups. It is why the U.S. government is scrambling to deepen partnerships. But let's be honest, this is not a partnership from a position of strength. This is a partnership out of necessity. Because America knows that if it does not align with India, it risks being left behind in areas it once dominated. And remember, this is not a short-term spike. This is a generational shift. India is not rising temporarily. It is building systems that will shape the next century: payments, AI, space, healthcare, education. These are not industries of the past. These are the industries of the future, and India's is positioning itself at the center. That's why America feels unprepared. They never thought the future would be written in Bangalore as much as in San Francisco. When you look at this shift in technology, you cannot separate it from geopolitics because technology today is not neutral. It is power. Whoever controls the platforms, the data, the supply chains controls the future. And this is where America realizes India's sudden rise is not just an economic story. It is a strategic story. For decades, America viewed global competition as a TW player game, the US versus China. That was the lens. Every policy, every investment, every alliance was framed as part of that rivalry. But while Washington and Beijing were locked in confrontation, New Delhi was quietly moving forward. India was not shouting. It was not threatening. It was simply building. And when you build consistently while the giants are distracted, one day you wake up and find yourself at the center of the game board. Think about the supply chain crisis after the pandemic. For years, America relied on China to manufacture, to assemble, to supply. But suddenly, that dependence became a vulnerability. And guess who became the most natural alternative? India, not just because of cheap labor, but because of political trust, because of democratic alignment, because of a willingness to scale. Apple didn't start moving production to India by accident. This was a strategy. The United States realized if we cannot rely fully on China, we must cultivate India. But here is the twist. India is not simply a backup. It is not willing to play second place. It is building its own ecosystem, its own leverage. Look at defense. America sells weapons, technology, and intelligence partnerships. But India is no longer a passive buyer. It is developing its own drones, its own missiles, its own space defense programs. It is testing hypersonic systems. It is developing indigenous fighter jets, and it is setting up cybersecurity frameworks. This changes the dynamic. America cannot treat India the way it treats smaller allies. India is too big, too independent, too ambitious. And that independence means America cannot fully predict India's moves. At the same time, India knows how to balance. This is what shocks Washington even more. India buys oil from Russia. It negotiates with the Middle East. It partners with America on semiconductors. It aligns with Japan and Australia in the Quad, and yet it maintains trade ties with China. This balancing act is not a weakness. It is a strategy. It means India never puts all its eggs in one basket. And that makes India unpredictable. And unpredictability is what great powers fear most. Now let's zoom in on the US-India relationship itself. For years, America assumed India would naturally align with it. They assumed cultural ties, democracy, and diaspora would guarantee loyalty. But the truth is India aligns only when it benefits India. And that is a new reality America is struggling with. Because America is used to allies that follow, not partners that negotiate, India negotiates everything. India questions everything. India doesn't just accept American conditions. It sets its own, and when America faces that, it realizes India is not an ally in the old sense. It is a pure competitor that happens to be friendly, and this is where China enters the picture again. America thought India's rise would be useful to contain China. That was the strategy. Use India as a counterweight. But what they didn't see was India building a position where it is not just anti-China, it is pro-India. India is not fighting to be America's soldier in Asia. It is fighting to be Asia's leader. That subtle difference changes everything. If you look carefully, the triangular relationship of the 21st century is not just US-China. It is US-China-India. 3 poles, not 2. And in this triangle, the US cannot dictate terms the way it once did. because India has its own leverage. Its population, its markets, its technology, its military, its diaspora. These are not bargaining chips. They are pillars of global influence. And think about energy. While America talks about green technology, India is executing on solar energy at a scale the world has never seen. Entire villages powered by clean energy, massive solar farms visible from space and government manned. It's pushing renewable adoption. This gives India another kind of power, moral authority. While America struggles with polarization and political gridlock on climate policy, India can point to results. And in the global South, that matters. It gives India credibility that America has lost. So you see the larger picture. America was unprepared because it misread India. They thought of India as a junior partner, as a secondary player, as a slow-moving democracy. Instead, they got a fast, innovative, independent giant. And once you misread a country's trajectory, you miscalculate your own strategy. That is the shock America faces now, and don't underestimate the cultural dimension. Technology is one thing, geopolitics is another, but culture shapes perception. Bollywood films dominate markets. Indian music is spreading on global platforms. Indian food is in every major city, and Indian CEO lead global companies. Soft power is becoming as influential as hard power. When you combine that cultural influence with technological progress and geopolitical leverage, you don't just have a rising country, you have a rising civilization. That is what America didn't prepare for. So when people in Washington ask how did India get here so fast, the answer is simple. You weren't paying attention. You were busy watching the US-China rivalry. You underestimated the scale. You underestimated resilience. You underestimated hunger. And hunger, the hunger to prove, to build, to rise, is the most powerful driver of all. When I look at India today, I don't just see a country. I see a mirror that reflects the next chapter of globalization, the mistakes of old powers and the opportunities of new ones. And that is why so many people are asking, what does India's rise really mean for the world, and what lessons can we learn from it? The first lesson is about underestimation. Never underestimate a nation with youth, with ambition, with history on its side. For centuries, India was written off as poor, chaotic, and divided, but chaos can be energy, division can be diversity. Poverty can create resilience. What the world saw as weakness, India turned into strength, and this is why America was shocked, because they confused noise with weakness. They confused democracy with inefficiency, and they confused patience with stagnation. The second lesson is about scale. Scale changes everything. 1 billion people online is not just a statistic. It is a gravitational force. When you have that many minds connected, that many consumers active, that many creators producing, you don't just play in the global economy, you reshape it. This is something America forgot because it has never faced a competitor of India's size with democratic freedoms intact and technological adoption accelerating at lightning speed. The third lesson is about independence. For too long, global strategy assumed that smaller nations would align with bigger powers. But India's rise proves a new reality. Nations will no longer choose sides, they will choose themselves. And that changes the entire balance of global power. Because if India can do this, imagine what Indonesia, Brazil, Nigeria, or others can do when they follow the same path. We are not entering a unipolar or bipolar world. We are entering a multi-polar world, and in this multipolar world, respect will matter more than dominance. The fourth lesson is about technology itself. Technology is not just about chips, software, or satellites. Technology is about dignity. When a villager in India can pay digitally with UPI, he feels empowered. When a farmer can check market prices on a smartphone, she feels included. When a student can learn online for free, he feels hope. Technology is no longer just a business tool. It is a human right, and that mindset is why India's innovation model feels different. It is not only profit-driven, it is necessity-driven, and necessity-driven innovation is unstoppable. Now, America must face a choice. Will it treat India as a true partner with respect and equality, or will it try to control, to lecture, to impose conditions? History shows that when powers try to control India, they fail. Empires failed, colonial powers failed, and even neighbors failed because India bends but never breaks. If America repeats the mistake of arrogance, it will lose not just India, but the trust of the entire global South. But if America learns humility, if it sees India not as a threat but as a teacher, then both can shape a new century together. And for India, the choice is also clear. Rising is one thing, sustaining is another. With great power comes great responsibility. India must guard against its own challenges: inequality, bureaucracy, corruption, and infrastructure gaps. These can slow progress if ignored, but if addressed, they can become the fuel for even greater transformation. The world is watching not just how India rises, but how India leads. Will it lead with wisdom, with inclusivity, with balance, or will it repeat the mistakes of other rising powers that became too aggressive, too inward-looking, too arrogant? That is the test ahead for you listening to me today. The real question is not, will India rise? That is already happening. The question is, are you prepared for a world where India is a central force, because preparation is everything? If you are an entrepreneur, understand India's market. If you are a policymaker, understand India's balancing act. If you are an investor, understand India's technology ecosystem. And if you are a student, understand India's history, because history shapes the future. America wasn't prepared, that was the truth. It assumed India would always play catch-up, but the story flipped. India is not catching up, it is setting the pace, and the rest of the world must now adjust to that rhythm. I'll leave you with this reflection. The 20th century was shaped by two powers, America and the Soviet Union. The 21st century will be shaped by more than two. India is one of them, and when 1 billion people rise together with technology, with ambition, with pride, that is not just economics. That is destiny, and destiny, my friends, does not wait for anyone. You can resist it. You can deny it. But you cannot stop it. The world today must learn this lesson fast. India is no longer the future. It is the present, and if you are not ready, the shock will not come tomorrow. It is already here.